On the 14th of May, 1264, Richard of Cornwall, the self-proclaimed King of the Romans, found himself hiding in a windmill, fearing for his life.
The barons came up to it and called out loudly to him, come down, you wretched miller."
His brother, Henry III, King of England, was in the custody of a rebellious baron. He had just been defeated in pitched battle outside the town of Lewes in Sussex. And now his kingdom fell wholly under control of the uncrowned king, Simon de Montfort. I'm going to tell you the story of a tyrannical king and his unruly barons, and the result of their conflict leading to the first ever example of parliament in this country and the first ever enforced limitations on royal authority. Our story begins with the rule of Henry III.
Henry III was not one of the great monarchs of Britain. There's no doubt who was legally in charge. Henry was in charge. But beneath him he had a set of lords who were themselves Normans, often related to the king, and very powerful individual people. Many of these people got above themselves, and thus the king kept a very firm hand on them. And during the reign of Henry III, the nobles had control in their own areas and were unwilling to give proper authority to the king, according to the formalities of the feudal system.
The leader of the baronial opposition was the Earl of Leicester, Simon de Montfort.
Well, hopefully, the Bruce has big pockets. Pick this man up! Take him to the fortress!
Some kings were very powerful and they ruled personally through their council and dominated their council. Henry III was not one of those. He was very much subject to the influence of others, particularly the senior Norman lords who were related to him, and Simon de Montfort was one of his relatives. He was a much more competent organiser. He had much clearer ideas about what was going on. He was already a powerful man in the king's council, but he didn't always get his way, and Simon de Montfort was a man who really liked to get his own way.
During the reign of Henry III, this Cluniac priory was one of the largest and wealthiest in the country. The Royalist army arrived just in time for the priory's biggest feast day of the year, the Feast of St. Pancras. Their arrival disrupted the quiet lives of the monks, who were obliged to offer hospitality. But here, the king garnered additional religious support, and his army swelled to 10,000 men. It was here that Simon de Montfort sent two bishops to try and negotiate a peace between the two armies. The negotiations were cut short by Henry's brother, Richard of Cornwall, as well as his bold 27-year-old heir, Edward. dawn, 14th May 1264, an army of 5,000 men appeared on the hills overlooking Lewes, much to the surprise of the English king. Based here at Lewes Castle, the hot-headed Prince Edward was the first to react. Leading his forces out, he charged the left of Simon de Montfort's line. This part of the line was formed of unseasoned recruits from London under Seagrave, and they broke quickly under the weight of the cavalry charge.
Soon the Londoners were routed, for Edward thirsted for their blood because they insulted his mother. He chased them for 4 miles, slaughtered them most grievously.
Prince Edward chased the Londoners far from the battlefield. The footmen were easily cut down by his mounted knights. To Edward, this was a resounding victory. The rest of the king's contingent arrived sporadically, tired from the long uphill march and the previous day's feasting. But confident in his numerical advantage, Henry pushed up the hill and attacked Simon de Montfort's line in its centre. Henry III pushed his army into Simon de Montfort's centre, taking the initiative. However, the fatigued army could only achieve limited success against the most experienced parts of the baronial line. Simon de Montfort, seizing this opportunity, threw in his reserve and pushed the royalist army back down towards town.
The populace of the English bore the shock of a very grievous fight at the castle of Lewes, for to wrath yielded reason, life to the sword. Many fell, truth prevailed, and the false fled.
The battle was fierce and bloody. The de Montfort's momentum pushed the battle down into town. With Lewes ablaze, King Henry accepted Simon's renewed offer of terms.
Apologies, mate. General, monsieur. On your knees. Order, sir.
The king was forced to sign the Mise of Lewes, and although no examples have survived till today, it is likely the king was forced to accept the provisions of Oxford. Parliament would be held 3 times a year, and each borough would send knights and important townsfolk to join the bishops and barons in Parliament. After imprisoning Henry and his supporters, Simon de Montfort governed England for 15 months. However, Prince Edward escaped, and the following year, 1265, the Battle of Evesham, Simon was defeated and killed. That being said, the Battle of Lewes still resonates today.
In the settlement after the Battle of Lewes, the Mise of Lewes, as it was called, conceded to the lords, to the rebellious lords, quite a lot of what they wanted, and that included a representation in a large national body, which eventually became Parliament. It wasn't a democratic Parliament. It was very much a Parliament of the other lords to advise the king, in the same way that today Parliament formally advises the king. Today the king is bound to go along with the advice. That wasn't necessarily the case in those days. But the principle of a parliament in which you had lords, men of influence from all around the country gathered in London to advise the king was settled, was consequent on the Battle of Lewes.
Here in Lewes, the battle is still remembered today. Hundreds of reenactors descending on Lewes to commemorate the 758th anniversary of the battle. I think I'm going to go and join in.
Still breathing? Where were we? Ah, back to business.